Why does your team slow down the moment you're not in the room or on a call with them? If that sounds familiar, your message isn't probably landing the way you think it is. In this video, I'll show you why repeating yourself doesn't work, how to actually align your business and team with your mission, and how the best founders use questions instead of instructions so your team listens and takes action. A lot of founders think that the solution to poor execution is more communication. Another meeting, another Slack message, another reminder, another follow-up. And for a while, that feels productive because things move when you push them. But then something starts happening. The company moves fast when you're involved, but slows the moment that you're away. That usually is the sign of one thing. Your communication is creating dependency instead of clarity. A lot of founders unknowingly become the engine behind every decision. Every priority passes through them. Every problem needs their input. Every project only moves when they're personally applying pressure, and that doesn't scale. And strangely, the harder they try to fix it, the worse they make it, because they start repeating themselves constantly. We talked about this. This is important. I mentioned this last week, but repetition has a hidden cost. When leaders repeat instructions constantly, teams stop developing judgment. Subconsciously, people start to assume the founder will remind us. The founder will step in. We don't need to fully own this yet. Over time, the team waits instead of thinks. There's another problem too. Words only carry weight when people believe they matter. If a founder talks constantly, changes priorities every week, and then jumps into every conversation, eventually their words become background noise, not signal. If everything sounds important, nothing is. Now compare these two. A founder says, "Guys, we really need to improve onboarding. We talked about this. Please prioritize it." Well, that's an instruction. Another founder says, "If onboarding feels confusing, customers lose trust before we've earned it." That's different. Now the team understands the principle behind the work, not just the task. One creates a temporary compliance, the other creates aligned thinking, and that's the difference. The founders people listen to usually aren't saying more. They're saying less, but everything they say connects back to the same story. They're the ones whose words consistently point in the same direction. Because great founders don't communicate through random instructions all day. They communicate through one clear story. And when I say story, I don't mean a motivational speech or just pretending to be Steve Jobs in a black turtleneck. I mean, the company genuinely understands what matters here, why it matters, and what winning looks like, and what kind of company they're trying to become. That clarity, it changes everything, because most teams don't slow down because they're lazy. They slow down because they're constantly trying to figure out what the founder actually cares about right now. 1 week at speed, then polish, then growth, then efficiency, and then shipping faster again. And eventually the company becomes reactive because the founder is reactive. Your company will mirror your communication style. This is where a lot of founders accidentally create chaos. They think leadership means constantly introducing new ideas, new priorities, and new directions. But the strongest founders usually do just the opposite. They reinforce the same core narrative over and over in different situations. Everything connects back to the same mountain. Your team should feel like they're climbing one mountain together. They should know where the summit is, why it matters, and what progress looks like. What destroys companies is when people wake up every Monday feeling like the founder handed them a completely different map. When teams lose that directional clarity, they stop making confident decisions. They wait, they hesitate, they check upward constantly. They delay execution because they're trying not to make the wrong move. But when that narrative is stable, something powerful happens. People start making decisions without needing constant permission because they understand the principle behind the work. And that's the real goal. Not a team that blindly follows instructions, a team that understands how to think. That's how execution starts scaling beyond the founder's direct involvement. And once that narrative becomes clear, great founders stop giving constant instruction and start doing something else entirely. The goal of leadership communication isn't just to deliver information, it's to create ownership. And ownership almost never comes from constant instruction, it comes from participation. This is something I learned years ago doing mentalism. In mentalism, the moment someone participates, everything changes. If I just stand on stage and perform at an audience, they stay observers. They watch, they judge, and they disconnect. But the moment that someone becomes involved, the moment they make a choice, answer a question, commit to an idea, the psychology part of the experience, now they have ownership about the outcome. And leadership works the same way. A founder who constantly gives instructions creates passive observers waiting to be told what to do next. But the founder who asks the right questions forces people to engage mentally. What do you think that the customer experiences here? Does this reflect the standard of what we said matters? Those questions do something instruction can't. They force reflection, judgment, participation, and people support most strongly what feels like their own conclusion. That's why the best founders aren't flooding the room with answers. They establish the narrative clearly, then ask questions that pull people deeper into it. Because when people participate in the mission, they stop acting like employees completing tasks. They start acting like owners protecting standards. So how do you actually communicate this way without sounding vague, passive, or disconnected? The founders whose words carry the most weight do 5 things consistently. I call it the WEIGHT, or WEIGHT framework, because strong founder communication isn't about saying more, it's about making fewer words mean more. W, what actually matters. Weak founders communicate tasks, strong founders communicate principles. A weak founder says, fix onboarding. A strong founder says, customers need to trust us immediately. Now the team understands the principle behind the work, not just the checklist. E, explain the meaning. People move faster when they understand why something matters. If the team only understands the instruction, they can only execute the instruction. But when they understand the mission and the reason behind the work, they can make decisions without needing you to be involved constantly. I, invite reflection. Instead of issuing commands, strong founders ask things like, what do you think the customer experiences here? Or, does this reflect the standard we said that matters? Or, if you were the client, would you feel this is excellent? Questions create ownership. The moment that people participate mentally, they stop acting like task followers and start acting like people responsible for protecting standards. G, guard the narrative. Don't change direction every week. One of the fastest ways to destroy alignment is to constantly introduce new priorities and definitions of success. Your team should feel like they're climbing one mountain together. What kills momentum is waking up every Monday with a completely different map. H, hold your words. Founders whose words carry weight don't waste them. Over-explaining, emotionally reacting, repeating constantly, all of this weakens authority. Every sentence sounds important, but eventually none of them are. And T, tie everything back. Every connection, every meeting, every decision, tie it back to the mission, to the standard, to the story. That consistency is what creates organizational thinking. And that's the real goal. Not a company that only moves when the founder pushes it, but a company where people understand what matters deeply enough that they can move without you standing over every decision. Because if your company only moves when you're in the room, you haven't built alignment yet. You've built dependence. The founders people listen to most are rarely the loudest in the room. They're the clearest and the most consistent. So ultimately, the goal isn't having a company that only moves when you apply pressure. It's a company where people understand what matters deeply enough that they can think and decide and execute without needing constant reminders. One person who understood this better than most was Warren Buffett. He communicates with a clarity and calm that feels almost deceptively simple. But there's a reason that people trust him. I made a video breaking down exactly how he does it. Watch it next.